Welcome to From Pain Point to On Point, transforming sales challenges into wins with gamification, the podcast where we dive deep into common challenges faced by sales managers and explore innovative gamification solutions to overcome them. I'm your host, Brittney, and today I have with me SalesScreen CMO, Olga Karanikos. Hey, Olga, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here, happy to be talking to you, and excited to have you on the podcast today. We're going to chat about how to engage virtual teams with gamification. This has been and continues to be a hot topic across all industries, but especially in sales, where we know that connection and camaraderie and recognition among their peers is really important to keep motivation and morale high. So with that being said, I'd love to start off by asking you how you and your teams have adapted to remote work and how you guys maintain a strong team culture. And has that been challenging for you?
Yeah, I think it's something we've talked about for years as, across the spectrum in all industries, but it's more and more relevant today because I think people are hitting the fatigue. There are different types of structures coming through. And I feel like I used to hear all about remote work, but I actually think it's a lot harder to worry about hybrid teams and really make them cohesive. And that's what
Yeah.
we have at SalesScreen, right? So we have a headquarters in Oslo, and we've got an office full of people, and then we've got remote employees all over the world. And I think it's really tough. Some people get the benefit of that daily human interaction. They get really close at the office. They have their water cooler talk, and those remote employees don't always have that benefit. So I think it's super important, whether it's hybrid or fully remote, you really have to adapt to a different way of maintaining team culture. It's not as easy as just walking into the break room or having a Friday lunch. You have to be much more methodical about it. And I think it's important to take advantage of in-person opportunities. More conferences are coming back. It's an opportunity to get colleagues together. If you can really budget to have even one, all company retreat together, those things are so vital for creating the foundation that's going to help with that remote work later. And you have to have a mix of the bonding elements and the strategic work. So you're doing this fully focused content time all in person where you're having really strong, valuable conversations that are easier to have in person. But you're also creating those connections so that people who do go back and maybe the ones in the office will feel more connected to someone who's remote and be able to give them a call and chat about something. So the challenges are, out there. There's tons of them. I think it's just looking at everything and really understanding people are human. They need in-person interaction, but they need to carry that out when they're remote too and give them the opportunity. Ask human questions in meetings, like, how was your
Yeah.
weekend? Don't jump straight into the meeting. Actually talk to someone. Hey, Britt, you were on vacation. What did you do? And spend time on that in a team meeting. And especially if it's like a cross collaborative meeting, 5 minutes just to make it human is great, and bring some of that stuff through. And as a leader, especially being transparent and honest about all this being tough, and especially with remote employees, calling out that a lot of times it's tough for them to turn off and they're likely working long hours. So you want to lead by example and show balances on all of that stuff, but really just bringing the humanity into all of it. It's much harder with remote employees, and carrying that out from like the human interaction you get from an in-office team to those remote employees is super important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that culture is really difficult to build, especially when you're not in person. It feels so much more organic to build culture and to create a positive culture when you're in the office, and doing it remotely is so difficult. And it requires being a lot more thoughtful about how you go about creating that culture. So that being said, I think it's really important to look into how culture can positively impact a company. I think we also hear, obviously we hear about company cultures that are not great in these like really big, very successful companies that have kind of just become these juggernauts. Um, but I want to know really more, for our mid-market size companies, for not the Schmamazons of the world. Um, how do you feel like having a strong positive culture drives success in your company? And do you think that that does provide a competitive advantage in market?
I think it definitely does. Not only just from a hiring standpoint, but from a retention standpoint and everything in between, right? Like happy people lead to greater results. If you're giving them a company culture that they are proud to work for, happy to work for, believe in, it makes all the difference. You want people coming to work every day and wanting to come to work every day in like a very simple way. But that strong culture pays off in so many ways other than just the like obvious benefits. If you can create a culture of connection, of collaboration, you're really helping to get people sharing ideas, breaking down silos. And those are the kinds of things that make people feel very disconnected and start going towards that retention risk area. So, especially if you are working in a role that is a solo venture, like sales can feel like a very solo venture. You've got a target, you're going after it, you're working it. You don't always have a team to work with. But giving that kind of sense of support and collaboration, both within the sales team and across the revenue org and across the company, and having that sense of collaboration and connection and a strong company culture is going to have them feeling tethered to something other than just their workload. And I think that's super tough. And especially in a sales job where rejection is an everyday thing, it can be a very long road to a payoff. They need to feel like there's something to come in for every day. And the culture can really be the foundation of that, in addition to like all of the small wins that they're going to experience at work. But I think, people work for people in the same way we say that people buy from people. Like, it all comes down to people. It has to be a given that there's a strong culture, a very concerted effort put into maintaining that culture too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about like the sales floor and like having, ringing the gong and like all of these different things, and really kind of, there's always like tension between sales and like any other team in an organization because they're always getting all of the accolades. And
Yeah.
I don't think that people really take into account that it can be such a lonely job. It can be, you're doing it on your own, and, you're responsible for your targets, and that can be really difficult. And so like having that connection, that sense of belonging, that camaraderie is super important for sales specifically,
Yeah.
because they don't get it every day the way that like other teams may have it.
Right. Right. And there are plenty of teams too that have like long-standing goals, but they have milestones along the way. They have things that are going to make them feel connected to that project. So you're going to have the product team that's working for a launch for ages and ages and ages, but like they've got stuff along the way that's giving them those benchmarks and those milestones and different small projects to work towards. So every team has their challenges, right? So I think the culture becomes that bedrock for everybody of just, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this because I want to be here. I'm doing this because I want to hang out with my colleagues every day. It is something that gives a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, 100%. What strategies have you guys implemented at SalesScreen to foster a culture of connection and, I think, really importantly, collaboration within your teams?
Yeah, I would say it starts from that sense of belonging, not only to the company, but to the targets and the goals. So like we start by looking at things very big picture. Okay, so every year, here are the company OKRs, here's what we're working towards, here's how every team lines up to that. So giving everybody that sense of purpose, it gives them a sense of belonging, it gives them a sense of autonomy, of something to work towards, talking about that throughout the year, constantly having strategic sessions where we're feeding back in on how this is working, what things are paying off, what things are we rehashing. So we give people that foundation of, the achievable goals to go after, as well as like the camaraderie and the collaboration of everybody to work together. And I think that camaraderie really comes from our own product, which I'm not trying to put a pitch in here, but we drink our own champagne, and at the end of the day, I do think gamification helps vastly in this sense, because it's seeing the goals. So we'll visualize it, working towards the goals, commending people when they're working on it, when they're getting those small wins along the way, and showing it across the company. It just it gives them a home base, somewhere to really live and work together. Even if their projects are all over the place, they could be doing something completely different from their colleague, but still feel like it's laddering up to that ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What are some other gamification elements that you guys employ to help motivate and push your teams to hit those targets, to hit those goals, and
Yeah.
to collaborate with one another?
I think it starts with visualization, and it's really about seeing is believing. You want to see progress. You want to see metrics. You want to feel like also what you are doing is being seen. So completing your activities, completing your daily things, your weekly things, your monthly activities, and seeing that progress ticking up along the way is super important. And I think you want that to be transparent, not only to yourself, so you know where you stand, but transparent to your manager and transparent to other teams. So I think for us, that visualization is very important. And then from there, that gives you the foundation to work everything off of. So you can set achievements and like really commend someone for like when they've had their best week ever. And that feeling is fantastic because in so many orgs, like someone could be doing 300 dials a week, and that's painful, but like that's probably going to pay off for them. So you do want to commend that, and you want to be like, hey, John just had his like highest call record ever, and then maybe the next week he hit his highest sale record because he improved on that side. So like there are things that you want to call out along the way and really commend and put in front of the company, make that person feel really good about hitting that small milestone. And it keeps them motivated. And then of course, like there's competition, competition is just fun at the end of the day. And it gives you like a one in time kind of activity that breaks up the pace of everything, gives you something to work on, creates like a healthy banter environment too, which is my favorite part of competition. So you want to get in there, you want to trash talk a little, and like just give people an opportunity to think about something a little bit different than they did last week. And at the same time, you're motivating them to increase their activity levels, which is win-win-win-win. We know that across the board.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. The banter is my favorite part as well. It's always fun to talk a little smack. But that being said, I think it's a good thing to bring up. How are you able to balance competition and collaboration with the teams, right? Because, we're talking about how sales is kind of this individual role. And if you are setting up a sales competition, these salespeople are doing what they need to do for themselves, right? They're in it for themselves. So how are you balancing competition and collaboration? Are there other gamification elements that you're bringing in? How does that work on your team?
Yeah, I would say the feed helps tremendously. And like the feed is obviously a feature in our product, but the feed can really be a Slack channel. And you want to like shoot those wins out there, and you want to show the endorsement from not only the CEO, but any manager, like just showing that people are paying attention and seeing the movement on that stuff is massive. So I think the feed is great. So even if it's a sales competition and the ultimate goal for that week is to improve, one of their metrics, everybody can watch and everybody can cheer someone on, and they can be involved in it, and they see who the winner is and they can cheer that person on. And I think too, like you never want to leave the low performers out of all this stuff, but it gives them something to get excited about as well. Like if you're running the right competitions, like maybe it's not a race to the finish, but it's more about anybody who's participating has a chance to win. You get so many more people involved. They're super excited. Maybe they get a really cool reward at the end. And that's something different, something motivating, something that's getting them moving along. So I think it's also the visibility of how those competitions are going. And even if it's just sales, usually I think you should bring in all the other teams in the company. So like we have a Shark Week coming up next week, and every single person at SalesScreen is involved. Everybody's trying to pitch in for the sales effort too, right? Like who do you know in your network? Go and reach out to them. Excellent. Like what's the CS team working on this week? What's the marketing team working on? Let's all pull it into one week where we've just got like a massive push. The adrenaline's running. Everybody's excited. You've got a week that's set apart from every other week to just like try something different or really focus on like one metric that maybe is like lagging behind. And it's a great way for a manager to just lay some focus on it and get like an instant boost.
Yeah, I love that. I love that call out that there are ways to create competitions in which one, everybody can be involved because they're helping to push this one, whether it's a sales metric or anything else, you can get everybody in to push it forward. But I also think that there's definitely, in some larger companies, you kind of have like these sale cohorts, right? Where you have a seller that's tied to a CSM that, maybe is tied to a product marketer that is, all of these sales engineer, you kind of have these like little cohorts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a great way to like get all of the cohort into the
Yeah,
competition, get people betting against who's going to win.
definitely.
It's a great way to like pull in the banter part of that as well. Like I think those are really great call outs. Um, but while we are talking about competitions, and we're talking about sales, and that can always get a little dicey with the banter. How do you at SalesScreen, how do you guys avoid unhealthy competition? How do you make this so that this is a really motivating and positive force in the company, and it's not tearing people down or making people feel bad about,
Yep.
about it? How do you do that? How do you guys do that?
Yeah. I think like, look, you need to have the culture sort of foundationally there beforehand, right? So if you've got a toxic culture of just like intense, insane competition and you're out this week if you don't win and everything, it's not going to help there, to be honest, right? And I think that's one way to start of just like, okay, is there a level of communication and respect? Excellent. We're going to bank on this and move up. Encourage the banter, encourage the trash talk in a healthy, respectful way, right? People generally are not mean in a public forum. So like they're not going to go out onto the feed and say some really, really rude stuff. They're going to take the opportunity to just blow off some steam and like call out a colleague or battle a colleague or whatever and just take advantage of that opportunity. I think everybody's generally pretty respectful to start, but I think it comes down to like the mechanisms behind those competitions you choose too. We talked about like maybe don't pick the race to the finish every time, or if you're going to have a race to the finish one with like a top 3 standing, align it with something that's also just for like the fun of it. Maybe there's a competition on fitness, so like anybody can get involved in that, and like the quietest person on the team is somehow going to come out being like the marathon runner and win that competition. It gives them another element of fun at the workplace. But like I think getting everybody involved is so important. And the fact of the matter is that you're going to have low performers. That's what happens in every org. And if that low performer is just not getting motivated and just not investing, that also is going to show. And so for a manager, they're going to know who they need to pay more attention to, who they need to help along the way. They're going to see that maybe something's getting triggered, they're not getting involved. Why? How do I help? Find something else that's going to get them going. And that's just going to kind of how it's going to work. But I think you can find all different types of competition that engage people in new ways that they never thought would engage them. And I think it's easy to default to the top, the most, the race, like find something else, do a lottery, do a team. You talked a little bit about cohorts or pods, do a team competition, mix up the teams, have them work with somebody else, pick a different type of thing they're competing for. Maybe it's not your typical metrics of cold calls and dials and meetings and whatever. And maybe it's like using that new marketing message successfully and give them something else to think about. There's so many different ways to make this really work for people to get them coming in refreshed every week.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great point too, that, not everyone is meant to be in sales. Sales is a hard
Yeah.
job, right? And it takes it takes a certain type of person, it takes a certain type of grit to be successful in sales. And, sometimes you don't have it.
Yeah.
All right, amazing. We are coming up to time, but I do want to ask you one more question. And I want to know, what do you think the long-term impact of gamification is on team culture? And does it lead to lasting change?
Yeah. Again, I'm biased, but I do believe it does. And I think, if we look at everything we've kind of talked about and why it works, I think accountability is so important for people's like happiness at work, but also for managers to get the performance out of their teams they need. And it's going to create that sense of accountability. It gives people self-autonomy. I'm working towards something. I have ownership of my goals. I'm really working on this. I'm visualizing everything I need to see. I'm competing on my targets. I'm getting recognized for that work. Like it really gets them in a place where they are seeing how they're going to get to target, but also like really holding ownership over it. And that helps managers. Obviously, you want a team that is accountable for their own goals and really working towards their own targets and really paying attention and self-motivating in a lot of cases. And gamification is just helping them push that along. And, at the end of the day, like, we drink our own champagne, we use our products, we've been around for 13 years now. Our average tenure of our employees is anywhere from 7 to 10 years. Like, we've got some pretty good retention. And I would definitely say the gamification helps there. People hang around. They like the culture. They love the camaraderie. They love the motivation. They come back for more. We've had customers who have been with us for those 13 years. It doesn't get stale. It's a part of their culture. Once that is in that org and they're really living and breathing and using all of those elements to help keep people on track and motivated and moving those middle performers up and all that, it's really hard to leave. So I think, it's there. The impact is there. We see it not only in the sales industries and all these industries. There's a reason that the Duolingos of the world are using gamification and learning systems are using gamification. Like, all of that really works. It's really sticky. It gets people excited. It gives them something different to do. And it just adds an extra element of fun at the end of the day, but it really helps with that retention as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We see gamification in everything that we do nowadays. It's almost like it's just part of our daily lives now. And it's so incorporated. We like don't even realize that it's happening. So it kind of feels like, why wouldn't we apply this same mechanism that works so well to our workplace? That just seems like
absolutely.
definitely.
As I'm going to go get like my Starbucks and, punch my card and make sure I've got my next stars coming through. Like, it's every day. It's there.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Olga, for joining us today on From Pain Point to On Point. Where can people reach you if they want to connect with you?
Find me on LinkedIn. I've got an incredibly long name that you will see probably in the title of this, but find me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk gamification, motivation, culture, any of that stuff. And yeah, this was great. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Amazing. All right. Well, we hope that you guys found some valuable insights and practical tips to tackle your sales challenges. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Meet me back here in 2 weeks for another episode. And thanks again for joining.